There is someone in your life who cannot seem to manage. They cannot fix the simple things. They cannot carry their share. They cannot get through an ordinary week without something going wrong, and without you being the one who holds it together. And you have been holding it together for a very long time. You tell yourself they are struggling. You tell yourself they need support. You tell yourself that this is what love looks like, showing up, again and again, for someone who cannot show up for themselves. But somewhere underneath all of that, there is a question you have never quite let yourself ask. What if they can? What if the helplessness is not real? What if the person you have been rescuing, covering for, and carrying has been watching you do it, and has been counting on you doing it all along? That is what this video is about, because covert narcissists do not just struggle. They perform struggling. And once you understand why, nothing about the dynamic will look the same again. Let us start with what performed helplessness actually achieves, because this is not random behavior. It is a strategy, and it works. When someone appears helpless, the people around them feel compelled to help. That is a deeply human instinct. We are wired to respond to vulnerability. We move toward people who seem to be drowning. We reach out. We take over. We do the thing so they do not have to. And the covert narcissist knows this. Not necessarily in a calculated, conscious way, though sometimes it is exactly that. More often it operates as a deeply ingrained pattern that has been refined over years, across many relationships, because it has always produced the same result. When they perform helplessness, you step in. When you step in, they receive your attention, your effort, your care, your time. When you are focused on managing their incapacity, you are not focused on your own needs. You are not setting limits. You are not asking whether this relationship is working for you. You are too busy keeping things afloat. That is the function of performed helplessness. It keeps you in a particular role, the capable one, the responsible one, the one who holds everything together, while they occupy a role that demands very little and receives a great deal. Now let us look at how it actually shows up, because it is rarely dramatic. That is what makes it so difficult to identify. The covert narcissist does not collapse in obvious ways. They do not announce that they are refusing to contribute. What they do is drift. They seem tired. They seem overwhelmed. They seem just slightly too fragile to manage the thing in front of them. They stare at the task long enough that you take it from them. They describe their day with enough quiet suffering that you feel guilty for mentioning your own. They move through the home with a weight about them that silently communicates, "This person is not okay." And you respond to that signal automatically, because you care. This is the architecture of the performance. It does not require them to say a single dishonest word. It operates entirely through atmosphere, through size, through posture, through the particular quality of their silence, through what is implied rather than stated. And because nothing explicit is ever said, there is nothing explicit to challenge. When you eventually reach the edge of your patience, you cannot even point to what has happened. You just know that you are exhausted, and they seem fine. Here is something that most people do not understand about the victim role in covert narcissistic relationships. It is not just a way of extracting care. It is a form of protection. As long as the covert narcissist is positioned as the one who is suffering, they are immune to criticism. Think about what happens when you raise a concern. When you say, "I need more from you." When you try to name the imbalance. When you express that you are carrying too much. What do? They do not become defensive in the obvious way. They do not argue. Instead, they become more fragile. Their pain increases. The conversation that was supposed to be about what you need becomes, within minutes, a conversation about how much they are struggling. And you find yourself, again, in the position of comforter, of the one who backs down, of the person who feels guilty for even raising it. That is the armor at work. The victim identity does not just win them sympathy. It also makes them impossible to hold accountable. Because you cannot place demands on someone who is already overwhelmed. You cannot challenge someone who is already suffering. To do so feels cruel, and they know that it feels cruel, and they rely on it. Now let us talk about you, because understanding their pattern is only part of this. The other part is understanding why their pattern worked on you specifically. Most people who end up in this dynamic are not naive. They are not weak. They are people who have a deep capacity for empathy, who take their commitments seriously, who genuinely believe that if someone they love is struggling, the right thing to do is help. Those are good qualities, and the covert narcissist found them and used them, because the performance of helplessness is calibrated to the person receiving it. They learned, consciously or not, What kind of suffering moves you? What kind of fragility makes you put your own needs aside? What tone of voice, what specific expression, what particular kind of quiet gets you to step forward every single time? And so you step forward, not because you were foolish, because you were kind. But there is something else at work in many of these relationships that is worth naming directly. The dynamic often produces something called a sense of earned value, a feeling that your worth in the relationship comes from what you do rather than who you are, that you matter because you manage, that you are necessary because you carry the load, and as long as you are carrying it, you feel needed. That feeling can become its own kind of trap. At some point, if you have been in this dynamic long enough, you will have seen it, a moment when the helplessness disappeared. Maybe it was something they did with ease for someone else. Maybe it was a task they managed perfectly when the stakes were right for them. Maybe it was the sudden competence that appeared the moment you stopped being available. The way the thing they could not do became something they did without difficulty the moment you were no longer there to do it for them. That moment is disorienting, because it does not fit the story you have been living. If they can do it, then why have they not been doing it? The answer is not that they were pretending all along in some theatrical, deliberate way, though that is possible. The more accurate answer is that their capacity is selective. It rises to meet situations where they stand to benefit. It recedes in situations where someone else's effort is available and preferable. This is not the psychology of a person who cannot cope. This is the psychology of a person who has decided they do not need to. The word covert is doing important work in all of this. An overt narcissist will tell you directly, this is your job, not mine. They will demand. They will dismiss. The dynamic is visible and explicit. A covert narcissist does something much more difficult to detect. They make you feel as though the imbalance is your choice. As though you are helping freely because you want to, not because the situation has been arranged so that you have no realistic alternative. They never ask you to carry everything. They simply make it appear that they cannot, and wait for you to decide that you will. And so the responsibility for the dynamic gets placed quietly on you. If you ever name it, if you say, I am doing everything, the implied response is, I never asked you to, which is technically true, and completely dishonest at the same time. That gap between what is technically true and what is actually happening is where covert narcissistic manipulation lives, in the space between what was said and what was engineered. So what do you actually do with this? The first thing, and this is the hardest thing, is to stop managing the performance. Not because you stop caring about them, but because your continued management is the thing that sustains the dynamic. Every time you step in, you confirm that stepping in works. Every time you absorb the consequences of their inaction, you remove those consequences. Every time you make their helplessness comfortable, you make it permanent. What changes the pattern is what happens when you do not step in. Not with anger, not with ultimatums, but with a quiet, consistent withdrawal of the automatic rescue. You let the task sit. You let the consequence arrive. You let them encounter the reality that their incapacity has been producing, and that you will no longer be absorbing it. This is deeply uncomfortable at first, because the performance will escalate before it recedes. When the usual response does not come, the signal will get louder. The suffering will appear to deepen. The fragility will intensify. That escalation is not evidence that you were wrong to stop. It is evidence that the performance was working, and that they noticed it has stopped working. Hold steady. People who have moved through this dynamic and come out the other side describe a very specific feeling. It is not triumph. It is not anger. It is something quieter and more solid than either of those things. It is the feeling of no longer being confused. For a long time, the confusion was the point. The performed helplessness worked precisely because it kept you uncertain. Were they really struggling? Were you being unfair? Were you not doing enough? That uncertainty kept you in place, kept you trying harder, kept you from looking clearly at what was actually happening. When the confusion lifts, when you see the pattern for what it is, there is a kind of grief in that. Because clarity often means accepting that the relationship was never quite what you believed it to be. But clarity also means something else. It means that you are no longer spending your energy managing someone else's performed limitations. It means that your attention, your capacity, your care, those things are available again. For yourself. For the people in your life who give as well as receive. That is not a small thing. That is everything. If this video has described something you are living right now, take a moment with that. You are not failing this relationship by seeing it clearly. You are not being unkind by naming what is happening. The clarity you are building right now is not the end of your capacity to love. It is the beginning of your capacity to stop giving that love to someone who was never truly receiving it. In the next video, we are going to go deeper into a related pattern, the covert narcissist who sets limits on their involvement in the relationship and then expects you to accept those limits as though they were reasonable. It is one of the most quietly damaging dynamics in long-term narcissistic relationships, and it is one most people do not have language for until they see it laid out clearly. If you want to understand that, and I think you do, make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss it. And if this video helped you see something you had not been able to name before, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. You might be giving them something they have been looking for a very long time. Take care of yourself, and I will see you in the next one.